Let's try it again. 3, 2.
1, and go.
Okay.
I don't understand.
There's like a delay there, though. Anyways, all right.
It was exactly the same in my head. You heard the delay. It's in your head, not my head. So we don't have notes for today's episode, do we?
We do not have notes for today's episode, but I think we can freestyle this one pretty good because that's basically what we've been doing over the last 3 weeks or so, basically. So today's episode is basically all about the new Fenix 8 and Enduro 3. Yeah, I guess first off, I think everyone and their mom probably knows by now that the new Fenix 8 and the Enduro 3 came out, and that's what we've been doing. So we actually took a big trip to Spain to actually test these about like 2 weeks ago, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, I think I mean, it's been, dude, it was a time.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It's been the longest time period ever.
But anyways, these new watches are certainly pretty exciting. We're going to get into all the actual nitty gritty details of those watches here in a little bit. But let's do a little quick trip recap. So we basically went down to the coast of the Barcelona area. I think we stayed in a town called Tossa del Mar, which was this great little town, by the way, on the ocean. Yep. But it provided us the opportunity for lots of biking, lots of hiking, as well as scuba diving, which is one of the new features of these watches. Yeah, it was I don't know. Did you like that place that we went? Like based on
it was great. It was sort of an accidental location that ended up being an extended stay location for quite a lot longer than we expected.
Which is always what happens with us, by the way. Always
what happens. But yeah, every single night was a new hotel.
Yeah.
So we because that's what we roll. So we had originally planned to go into Barcelona and do diving there.
Yeah.
But it turned out basically every dive shop in Barcelona doesn't actually dive in Barcelona. They dive an hour and 15 minutes away in the town that you just mentioned, because the water is just simply clearer there. So we thought, why are we going to Barcelona if we're going to dive somewhere else? Barcelona's great, obviously, but we might as well just simply go to that town and then save ourselves that morning having to get up early, because neither of us are really into the getting up early game. So we just went to the town instead, and it worked out great, because then when other crap hit the fan and we had to stay in that town for a number of days, then we were able to ride on beautiful coastlines that were just like epic. Basically, the town is like when people talk about going to Girona to ride, yes, they go to Girona, the town, but the town of Girona is actually inland. It's not technically on the coast. And all the pretty pictures you see of people riding in Girona that are on the coast, that's where we were, which was on the coast, not the town of Girona, which is inland by, I don't know, like 20 or 30K, maybe something like that.
Isn't Girona a region though, as well?
Girona is also a region as well,
yeah. Right, yeah.
But it's also a city. So people are like, the city itself is obviously super cool and very cycle forward, and that's where all the pros go to and stuff like that. But but all the pretty pictures you see on Instagram of people riding in Girona, it's all the coastline, and that's where we went. We just short circuited the whole thing.
Yeah, and so like Ray mentioned, it was really the ideal location to test many things at once. Just because, we don't just do feature review videos where we talk about the features. We really want to use these devices to actually call it a review. We're not going to put a review in the title unless we actually test all these features. So
accuracy, swimming, diving, open water or not open water. We do open water swimming, but also hiking and cycling and off-road cycling, on-road cycling, and running and in buildings. And this town actually turned out to be a really good test town, to be honest.
It's amazing.
For all the things, cliff slide stuff, no problems. To test GPS accuracy against really steep cliffs and tunnels and into the woods, and again, open water swimming and beautiful waters, some jellyfish, but it was to test the Fenix 8, this was an amazing spot for it. But we weren't done. Once we dealt with our delay problem, waiting for something to show up that we're waiting for on, and once we had that show up, then we moved into the mountains, and we had planned to go more central Pyrenees, kind of where the Tourmalet and things like that area, just on the border of France and Spain, and do a much longer trek. But things got shifted around, and we ended up going, what's the closest mountains to us at this point in time? And that was the town of Gossel.
Gossol.
Gosol?
Gosol. Mm-hmm.
And it's funny. So someone on Instagram hit me up and they're like, how did you guys choose this tiny little no-name town? Do you guys go there because no one's around, no one would see your wrists? And we're like, we just chose the closest point on the map to where we were.
It's like
Yeah, that was it. But it turned out awesome. Like, that was a great
amazing.
town to test stuff. There was nobody around. It was desolate in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
Some great restaurants there as well at night that we could eat after we were done spending 10 hours a day out in the trails and stuff. It was an awesome spot to ride, to hike, to trail run, like, and to eat. It was great.
Fantastic bakery, by the way, like absolutely amazing bakery. For those of you who follow like our Instagrams and stuff like that, I'm really, really, really into baguettes. And I was not expecting to get really good baguettes in Spain, but I had like a fresh baguette, I think almost every single day of our trip. It was fantastic.
Sorry, did you say a baguette as implying just one baguette?
True. There could be plural.
Yeah.
So
Are we finishing Instagram stories tonight? Because we stopped on like Friday, Thursday,
Yeah.
I think.
Yep.
I don't think we even got to the first hike.
Yeah, no, I
not
was
because we
actually
were trying to hide stuff. We just got exhausted, to be honest.
No, totally. Yeah, no. So no, I think, I've actually been kind of consolidating a lot of that stuff, and I hope to start publishing that pretty soon. So probably by the time that this episode comes out. Now, one thing I do want to quickly mention about our trip though. So there was, I think, a Reddit post or something like that came out that implied that this was a sponsored trip by Garmin. We paid for this entire trip out of our pockets. I've got a $4,000. Yeah, all the pockets. I've got a $4,000 credit card bill from all, for my plane trip, all the hotels, the food, everything like that. We fund these all ourselves. Like the
Totally.
reason that we do these again is that we truly want to test these devices to their limits and what these are intended to do. And we don't take any money from companies to review these devices. These are like all on our own dime. And again, it's like, we won't go to this length for like every single device, but since these are flagship devices, there's a lot to test on them. So again, we had to kind of choose a location that provided us opportunities to test these properly.
Yeah, and someone had also implied that like Garmin or someone else chooses locations. As we just kind of covered, we're flying by the seat of our pants. Like we literally had no idea where we were staying each night at like 3:00 in the afternoon. We were just like, what's available hotel wise, which the downside is you're paying a heck of a lot more sometimes. And again, we had to make changes last second. We booked our return tickets home. And that was like $400 per person, a one-way ticket from Barcelona to Amsterdam. Like that should have been like a €80 ticket. So yeah, we paid a lot of money to all this testing. And I think people appreciate though that we're putting in the effort to go and test in adventure-like locations. And certainly there are other places to do that as well. We kind of pick things that are interesting, that look good on video and photo, but also have a wide variety of test areas. Like if I were to test everything here in Amsterdam, I wouldn't be able to get altitude. I wouldn't be able to get the mountains and the cliffs and all the things that you want to test, and diving that you can see more than 6 inches in front of your hand, and all that kind of stuff. And so that's kind of why we make those trips and make the effort to put the time in this case, the literal money in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was even another comment in there about like the fact that we were hyping these up or something like that by like not showing our wrist. I would invite you to look at my Strava feed or my Instagram. I never show my wrist in any photo. This is not like special to this
No,
watch.
I mean, the vast majority of the year we're not showing our wrists, right? That's the reality.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of have to.
Always testing unannounced things. So
exactly.
And the fact is, we were testing things that were not just Garmin, by the way.
Sure.
So a bunch of things that were not just Garmin out there. That's all I'm going to say. Not just Garmin, both on wrist and off wrist. And so we were hiding things left, right, and down the middle. And the easiest way to do that is to hide all of your wrist as a starting point, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Each night on Instagram, we are cross-checking each other's posts like as we post them to make sure that we haven't accidentally somehow put something embargoed in there. Yep. It gets really complex when you have a lot of devices that you're testing at once, because we talked about September is bonkers. And so lots of things. Now, before we get too distracted, Des, we've got to go back to a different distraction, which is Precision Fuel and Hydration. They have sponsored this episode as well as all of our previous episodes. In fact, I actually use Precision Fuel and Hydration products on both of my hikes. If you're not familiar with Fuel Precision Hydration products, they're used by Tour de France teams, Major League Baseball teams. I saw them at the Women's Tour de France as well as the Men's Tour de France over the last little while here. In fact, they've actually got this new sticker packs with their products as part of their product sets now, where you can, of course, buy their actual nutrition products, but they have these stickers that you can go and put on your bike stem just exactly like the Tour de France teams do, and you can put exactly which products on there. But it's not just for cyclists, it's also for runners. If you have a water bottle, for example, or if you have a support bag or support kit that you want to put those stickers on so your support crew knows what you're doing for an ultra run. So again, using like an Enduro 3 or something like that, you can do this. But of course, beyond their sticker products, their actual hydration products that you're taking, all of them are Informed Sport certified, all of them are vegan, all of them are 2-to-1 glucose fructose and contain no artificial ingredients, and most importantly, they're edible. That was notable because on that second day that you decided to go hang out at the bakery, I ran out of food entirely. There was no food on that day for like 8 hours. The places were all closed. So I had a lot of Precision products to eat that day, cruising through them.
Nice.
And they got me to the end of it. When I got to you, I was running actually to you, not because I wanted to see you that badly that I had to run to you, but I had that much energy that I was able to run to you. So if you want to get their products, definitely check out the coupon code FITFILE on the screen right there for 15% off your first order. Thanks again to Precision Fuel and Hydration for sponsoring this episode.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
But with that, maybe we should circle back to the actual products themselves, unless you got one more thing.
No, actually, that's all I got. So anyways, let's talk about Fenix 8 and Enduro 3, and we'll talk about the Fenix E as well. That was announced. So the Fenix 8, so this was highly anticipated release. So what's nice about the Fenix 8 is that they basically they consolidated the Epics and the Fenix lineups into one. And that's what's so funny is I think like on one of our first episodes of this podcast was that we were talking about like what's Garmin going to do with their naming conventions moving forward. Like, are they going to call it the Epics Gen 3 or Epics 3 or something like that? And I have to give them kudos on what they did here is that they just like kind of merged it all into one with the Fenix lineup where they have an AMOLED option and then a memory pixel solar option. And this, I think, just will clear up a lot of confusion moving forward, while letting them like kind of retain that Fenix brand name, which is extremely strong, obviously. So
this brings up then the first question, right? Because we're gonna have lots of fun in this episode.
Okay.
So this afternoon I released my beginner's guide, and one of the questions, the I don't know, exact phrasing was basically like, okay, but should I wait for the pro models, right? So. And for those not familiar, in 10 seconds or less, Garmin doesn't treat pro models as a higher end model. Garmin treats the pro models as simply the next version of that model, right? So there was Fenix 5, and then a year or so later, Fenix 5 Plus, and then a year or so later, Fenix 6, and a year or so later, Fenix 6 Pro, a year or so later, Fenix 7, then a year or so later, Fenix 7 Pro, and now Fenix 8. The question then becomes, will Garmin finally get rid of, I'm just going to say it, the stupidity of calling a pro model a year later and not just call it the Fenix 9 instead? Because all it does is introduce confusion to consumers.
Well, okay, so this is, when it comes to naming conventions, this kind of goes back to like the Apple Watch Ultra 2 and maybe like the Pixel Watch 2, where those were minor updates in the whole scheme of things, but they still called them a 2. So this is where they could get in trouble almost from the consumer standpoint of a lot of backlash of, oh, it's the next generation, but it only has whatever, this extra new feature sort of thing. And it's not like a completely new device. So I don't know. So I think there's pluses and minuses, or pluses and ultras, whatever you want to call it, or pluses and pros to calling it a pro, whatever if they eventually do that or not.
Now, I see one way they could get out of this pickle is if in a year and a half they do something similar to what they are a year, they do something similar they did with the solar side back in like the Fenix 6 time frame or Fenix something, where they introduced solar a year later on some units, very similar to our favorite friend, the 945, right, with LTE. So could they come along a year from now or whatever and finally maybe give us LTE and be like, Fenix 8 LTE is your middle child step sort of thing there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then go to Fenix 9.
Yeah, I think, yeah, totally. So, I mean, yeah, there's lots of possibilities of what could potentially happen there. To kind of take a little bit of a sidetrack there. It's like, so I got a lot of those questions too. It's like, oh, should I wait for the Fenix 8 potentially Pro or theoretical Pro that comes out there? And, here's the thing. There's going to be maybe an 8 Pro. I can tell you that there's definitely going to be a Fenix 9. There's going to be a Fenix 10. It's like, if you need a watch, get the watch now. It's like, so waiting for the next thing can always just be like a waiting game, like all the time. So I mean, my recommendation always is like, if you need a watch now and this watch fulfills the features that you need, get it and don't look back.
Especially 2 days later, right? 2 days after the Fenix 8 releases, right? Like we're talking in a best case scenario, Garmin would manage to pull off something that would be like next summer, right? A year from now, roughly.
Sure.
I think as both of us touched on a little bit in review, this felt, I don't want to say rushed, but I would say like they skidded the airplane down onto the runway, and maybe not everyone's seatbelts are fastened, right? Like it was one of those, like there was a few moments in the user interface, especially because it is such a dramatically different user interface. And while there are some elements that are very, very similar, I guess we can kind of segue into that here in a second, but there's a lot of elements that under the covers, if you were talking from like a software engineering and UI design standpoint, there is a ton of work that the company would have had it done, Garmin would have had it done to deal with all these little kind of nuances that aren't obvious to end users, right? And we see some of those things unfinished, for example, around voice notes and the fact that it doesn't transfer your phone, or, lots of little things here and there that you're like, and they admitted when they talked to us that these aren't quite done yet. Focus modes being another example of that, where I suspect they had so much to do from a UI standpoint on this new UI and kind of sticking that as a whole that some things just sort of fell off the side of the boat. So I wonder, like if we were to fast forward a year from now, are we really talking a year from now? Are we talking beyond that or less that, et cetera? But let's talk about what is new on the Fenix 8 for now, which is, I would say, basically two marquee kind of feature sets and then a bunch of other things. And those two marquee feature sets are, number one, things to do with the microphone and the speaker. And so past Garmin watches have had a beeper, not a speaker. That's the difference there. And this one has a speaker. So it can actually play music. It can, has a microphone that you can talk into it and record voice notes, as well as take phone calls with a cell phone paired nearby. And then the second core feature area is around diving. So the addition of taking their descent lineup of diving functionality and pulling it into this watch, at least within certain restrictions. So which one of these topic areas do you want to tackle first?
Let's talk about the speaker and microphone. So yeah, let's talk about that first. So the speaker and microphone, it's definitely adding a lot of smartwatch functionality to their outdoor focused flagship watch. And it's kind of interesting with both the speaker and microphone as well as the dive features. There's like, it's almost like an Apple ultrafying the Fenix lineup in a way, because the Apple Watch Ultra does have, some recreational dive features. And then obviously it has, plenty of like smartwatch features like the speaker and microphone as well. The speaker and microphone, they're nice to have. In terms of the tones and whatnot that the speaker has, it certainly makes it a lot more friendly. It's very interesting. There are a lot of the same, actually it's I think almost exactly the same tones that are coming out of the Edge 1050, right? Like I think
so too. Yeah, there's been a few times where I've heard it. I'm like, wait a minute, I don't have an Edge with me right now.
Yeah,
like hiking and stuff, and you're like, wait a second.
Yeah, there's certainly nice touches. It just makes it a lot more friendly there. But in terms of the microphone, so the microphone can be used for accessing your voice assistant. You can take calls on the watch itself. You can do the voice notes, and then there's the voice commands. The voice commands is probably the feature that I use from the microphone the most. And it really depends on the kind of functions that you want to do with the microphone, if it's going to be useful. So for me, just like an Apple Watch, quite frankly, is that I use the raise to wake Siri sort of thing on an Apple Watch.
Yep.
The two reasons I use that on an Apple Watch is to set alarms and timers, and that's exactly the same reason I'm using it on the Fenix 8. And here's the thing, I love that. Like I was using it last night when I was cooking eggs, like to boil some eggs. Like I just for simple stuff like that. Other than that, I'm not really sure of the usefulness for it for me. So how about you? Like how are you utilizing those?
Not much at all.
Okay.
I think for two reasons. So I had to set a timer today for cooking lunch, and I ended up using a non-Garmin product to do so, simply because my hands were full and I didn't have a way to touch the button at the time, right? And I wanted to set a timer. So that's the one challenge, is you can't just be like, hey Garmin, set a timer for 10 minutes. You actually have to long hold that button. By the time you do that, for timers, it actually still saves you time, but for other tasks, it's not as fast. I've also found that while those core things like set a timer is good, there's a lot of like just English language ways you can ask things that it gets confused about easily. So setting a timer is really straightforward, right? Set a timer for 10 minutes, no problem. But then to ask it how much time is left in the timer, you can't say that. You have to say, show me the timers, or show me the timer, right? You can't be like, how much time is left in the timer. Now, those are areas where it's very easy for Garmin to improve that, right? They've got a list right now of, it looks like maybe 50 or 60 commands on their website of all those commands out there. I took a whole video recording of that, and I'm curious to see in 6 months and a year from now, how much bigger is that list, right? And how better is it at recognizing kind of the way you ask things, like, asking instead how much time is left in the timer, or how much time is left, or again, there's like 95 ways you can ask that same question in English, let alone every other language. So there's that. From a speaker standpoint, I find it actually fine for listening to music. Like if I was just in like a home gym scenario, and I don't know why I wouldn't have some other speaker system, but let's pretend I was, and I wanted to listen to music on the speaker itself on the watch, it's actually all right for that in a quiet environment. But I found that taking calls on it, the calls are incredibly soft for some reason. They feel way softer on, and I tried it on a couple different units here, just in case one of them might have been upset or something, but they seem a little bit soft to me. That said, one of the things I'm actually surprised about, you mentioned, this is kind of Apple Watch ultrafying the Fenix, is that I'm surprised they didn't put in an emergency siren. We saw Apple do that a couple years ago, and we saw Samsung do that more recently this past summer. It seems like that would have been like a really natural fit for Garmin in that realm, to be like, emergency siren for outdoor usage. So I'm kind of surprised there, because I feel like at some point, I wonder if we'll see Apple put a flashlight in their Ultra series, given the extreme popularity of that on the Garmin side.
Well, I would argue that the flashlight popularity, it far outweighs the siren functionality
Totally.
of an
Yeah,
Apple Watch,
totally.
though. So, and I don't know, like I haven't necessarily, I think I've heard of a few stories out there where the siren has come into play into an emergency situation on an Apple Watch Ultra. So, I mean, it is definitely useful, but the flashlight's something that you will use like literally every single day.
Oh yeah. No, I'm saying like
Yeah.
in this, if we look at that user population, it's far, and this will sound weird, it's far more likely that a Garmin user is going to get themselves in a pickle than it is an Apple Watch user out in the wilderness, right? So like, meaning that while there are way more Apple Watch users out there, obviously, than Garmin Watch users, I feel like if we're talking people in deep ultra scenarios, it's probably more likely they're going to have a Garmin on their wrist than it is an Apple Watch Ultra. Maybe not. I don't know. But to me, it's one of those, like, it would have been a really natural fit, and we don't see it there. But that may also explain why the speaker seems kind of a bit wimpy to me. I think that's an area where I would look to see, like in a Garmin Fenix 9 or whatever the heck is next down the road, will we see an improved speaker there that's much, much louder for whatever purposes?
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, that's the speaker and microphone on the Fenix 8. But now let's talk about the new dive feature. So one of the hardware upgrades that they did on the Fenix 8 was that their marketing language was they have new leak-proof buttons. And so the specifics around the hardware is that regular buttons use an actual like physical switch, I guess you could say, that like, toggle something inside the case, where the case on the Fenix 8 is completely sealed off, and the buttons now use an inductive sensor to trigger the actual button press. And now it's more of a haptic feedback that you get from the button versus the actual physical click. So anyways, little side note, the actual feel of the button is a lot different in my opinion. I still prefer the physical click from before, but these are fine. I mean, it's like, yeah, you're going to totally get used to it. It'll totally be fine. But anyways, getting back to the dive features though, although the Fenix 8 actually still has the same 10 ATM water resistance rating as the previous generation. It's now what, EN 3319 something,
There you go. Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
EN
So,
13319. Yep.
there you go. Yeah, dive certified. So this is going to be for recreational diving down to 40 meters, which from my understanding, so I'm like not just recreational, but like just entry level scuba diver level. But for my understanding, 40 meters, that's a long ways down, right? I mean, for scuba
That's
diving
going to
in general.
cover basically pretty much every recreational dive out there. Not
Okay.
pretty much. It will period cover every recreational
Yeah.
dive out there. If you look at diving, I've got a lot of dives, and if you look at diving from like a worldwide standpoint, and you were to plot all the dives that happen worldwide every single year, you're talking 99.999% of them are going to be within that 40-meter threshold. Once you get beyond that, you're going to need additional certifications. Well, you don't technically need them, but you should hopefully have additional certifications. And you're going to be diving with multiple gases likely, and it's basically kind of a technical diving category. And so that is 40 meters or 131 feet, and that's what Garmin has certified the unit to. If you were to compare this to their other descent units, that are much more expensive in the case of the Descent Mark III, Mark II, etc., that is up to 200 meters in depth, so quite deep. That unit also has air integration, so basically it's a little pod that you put on your tank, and it tells you how much air is left. And it also has with kind of a diver communication network thing introduced in the Mark III, as well as those additional technical diving modes and more gas options and a diver readiness feature. Very similar to training readiness, but a little bit different. But all the other core features are the same. I'm want to give Garmin some serious credit here. They could have really, I don't know what the right word is, neutered this product from a diving standpoint, and they didn't. If you're keeping yourself under 40 meters, within 40 meters, then that this product is totally fine, right? Unless you want to buy that tank pod extra, and then you can't right now. But this is a very solid offering that competes extremely well against Oceanic's Apple Watch Ultra app. So Apple Watch has a depth gauge in it, and they have a very basic kind of dive depth profile, if you will, on the watch natively. But in order to do diving with the Apple Watch Ultra, you need to use the Oceanic app. That's like the simple reality there. And that Oceanic app has all of the kind of ascent warnings and things like that. And this Garmin basically functionality mirrors that and has, I would say, deeper functionality in a few other areas. I mean, both of them have all the core functionality, but in Oceanic's case, you are going to pay a subscription for that versus Garmin, it's built in. Side by side, if you were to use them, you find them very similar in most cases underwater. It's really when you get to out of the water that you're going to see some of those differences for, like planning dives as well as kind of post-dive stuff. But again, one is built in and one is not. Oh, in case you're wondering what happens when you go beyond 40 meters, essentially as you approach that 40 meters, so 37 to 40 meters, it starts to give you a bit of a warning saying, you're getting pretty close to the limit. And then from 40 to 45, it gets reasonably upset at you. And then it'll start basically saying, this is, the end is near here. And then at 45, it stops giving you depth information, and simply tells you to ascend. But more importantly, at that point, all of the other stuff around decomp times and things like that go out the window because Garmin's only certified this to 40 meters. I think they technically probably certified it to 45 is my guess here. But they only certified it to that. And so beyond that, they can't guarantee the accuracy of this from a safety standpoint. So all those other metrics go out the window. And then as you get back to the surface, once you exit that dive, it'll actually lock the dive functionality for 24 hours. So you can't use it anymore. You're in dive timeout. And the reason for that is because all the other metrics around effectively your safety information from a no fly time, a surface interval, all that kind of stuff is thrown out the window because they don't know exactly how deep you went, right? So the only way to ensure that is to effectively reset for 24 hours. No real issues there. The only challenge with the depth of 40 meters, though, is if you're into free diving. I'm not a free diver, but if you're into free diving, apnea, as it's listed on the unit, it's not uncommon for a reasonably trained person to go beyond the 40 meters, right? That's not like a hugely deep depth for free diving, and so this is kind of limiting in that realm. And again, that's an area that I'm not super familiar with, but having talked to some friends that are, they're like, yeah, it's not great because we're a bit more serious than that. And these aren't super serious people, but kind of just, it's middle of the road serious, if you will. So that's the only limitation there. It'll be interesting to see how this, I think diving in general on this unit, how this matures over time. For example, again, I look at all these and we keep going back to what's the Fenix 9, which I know sounds silly, but I could see a scenario where some of this functionality from the Descent does, like the AirPod integration in a Fenix 9 does get pulled into the Fenix 9, because it would be a natural evolution if we look at the way Garmin deals with bringing, higher end features in one product over to the next category and so on. And that would ultimately upsell more tank pods. And if we look at the price anyways between a smaller edition Descent Mark III and a Fenix 8 AMOLED, they're almost the same. It's only the larger size Descent Mark III that's actually significantly bigger, significantly more pricey, like I think $15.99 or something like that. So I could see how those two might merge a little bit more closely down the road.
But I think that brings up a good point regarding the price, though, is that I think that there's certainly some arguments and some discussions around, whether these new features are worthy of like the Fenix 8 name, or, a completely brand new, model out there. But adding dive features is pretty significant from the sense of the fact that, the Descent Mark III, that's a very expensive watch. So, I mean, that bridges a pretty darn big gap there between that.
Yep.
Now, in terms of how many people will utilize this dive feature, that's to be, that's definitely up for discussion, just because, even for somebody like me, I could see myself using this feature like once a year, but at the same time, I could never justify getting a Descent Mark III myself, but I do really like the fact that it's there if I want to use it. So, is it going to be a commonly used feature? No, but it does make this watch significantly more capable in that department. I think another thing interesting too is that, when the Apple Watch Ultra came out with the diving features, I think that maybe it helped popularize diving a bit more. And I think that it's probably going to help popularize diving a bit more with the Fenix 8 that has these features now too.
Totally, yeah. I think it'll be interesting to see how uploads to Garmin's dive platform changes over time. Will we see more dive sites populated with that information? And again, one of the things we talked about in the past is that Garmin's Fenix watches aren't just appealing to endurance athletes, right? We've seen this happen for, the better part of, I would say, half a decade or so now, at least, where, you walk onto an airplane, and if you look around people's wrists, there's a lot of people on that airplane wearing a Garmin Fenix device that I would not classify as endurance athletes, right? Like, you can visually look at that person and be like, no, you're probably not doing an ultra this weekend, right? They're wearing it because it becomes this long battery life status-ish sort of thing, but it's just the watch they like, right? That has a long battery life, that isn't a watch with only a day of battery life. And so there are a lot of people out there that aren't necessarily endurance athletes, and these sort of features do appeal to them, including the speaker and mic bits and things like that. That is where I think we should probably maybe shift to the rest of the features that are new on this watch. And I just see, look up the ceiling, like which features would those be? And that's honestly the problem, right? So that's where there are no actual other new features on this watch from a sports standpoint, except for the UI redesign, which is debatable in a lot of different ways as to how well that succeeds, especially in the sporting standpoint. And then a handful of features around round trip routing, little tiny things that, like updates. If you went out and you want to set a target to run, for 5 miles, after 2.5 miles, it'll remind you to turn around, for example. Mm-hmm. In round trip routing, if you create a round trip routing course, then, and you get detoured along the way, it'll automatically, dynamically update that route to get you back to the distance you set, right? Those are cool little features. But if we look kind of holistically speaking, there are not any other actual new sport features on this watch, period.
Not really. I mean, it's just all, it is all updates. And I don't know, like, I think that, I think we probably need to get a little bit more clarity on which features are going to be coming back to older watches, like in terms of like, all right, so, is like the ski maps update and the more specific or the long-term strength training workouts, like those should be like pretty much for all Garmin users, or all, Garmin users with compatible platforms. Right. But the actual user interface stuff, I know that's going to be like a moving forward type of thing. So we probably need to get a little bit more clarity on if any of those other features are going to be ported back, but like the pretty much like hard no on moving back to older devices, the actual UI, like the new
Right.
organization of like the notification center, the revised organization of like the start button with the activities and so forth. So, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah, so the exact quote, just for clarity, because I think you and I have had to copy and paste this a bunch of times last little while. The
yeah.
exact quote we received about new features was, we asked whether or not any of the new features and functionality and things like that from the Fenix 8 will be moving back to other previous watches. And quote, the new features and interface improvements will not be rolled back to previous devices, period. They are an entirely new code base that isn't compatible with past devices, right? Like, that is the most hard core no we've honestly heard from Garmin in years on this kind of stuff. Like, generally speaking, when we ask this question, Des and I ask this question every time, and we get a rainbow spectrum of different answers from, sometimes like we'll get, here's all the features that are going back. Like we look at, for example, the Fenix 7 Pro Epix Pro last year. That was great. When that was announced, we asked the same question, and they said, actually, yeah, everything is going back to the Epix and the Fenix 7, first gen units, if you will. And there was literally nothing because all the software across the board went, and it went within 4 weeks, give or take, until the first public beta was out, 3 weeks, something like that. And then sometimes you get cases like when the Forerunner 965 came out, like which features are coming. And they said, well, just about everything's going to the 955 and the 945 LTE except X and Y because we don't have the graphical capabilities for this, right? And that's fine. That's like AMOLED versus MIP. This was a very hardcore no, nothing. And it's tough because I feel like Garmin has made such good progress the last few years on porting a lot of stuff back and really being on top of that. And I think users are starting to recognize that. And this is a hard message for a lot of people. There's been a lot of replies I had to make to be like, sad face, emoji, here's the answer. And I think that's only... It's challenging for people because you see the Fenix 8, which for a lot of endurance athletes, they look at that and go, there isn't the value prop there, right? To spend now a $200 to $300 price increase or $100 to $300 depending on how you want to calculate it. And then on top of that, this Fenix 7 Pro or Epix Pro they just bought sometime in the last year is getting no new feature updates theoretically going forward maybe. We don't even know at this point. It's a hard message. People, I think, are kind of a bit upset about it.
Well, okay, so again, like when we're talking about, we're kind of talking about two different things here. We're talking about a user interface, and then we're talking about new features. And we haven't heard that either one of those are going to make it back, to be clear. So, but that's where I would hope that some of the new features would actually come back by, again, like let's say like these ski maps and like the long-term strength training plans and stuff like that. The user interface, I can certainly understand where they're coming from, where, they had to rewrite their entire code base because we have certainly given them a lot of flack before in the past, going back to your 965 versus like Epix Gen 2 comparison video, just how many crazy differences there were between the two where feature wise, they were actually pretty much on par. It was just like the actual interface was just like completely different. So, I think that they probably recognize that they were on so many different software branches, on their end of things that they needed to do this rewrite to consolidate things and to have a more cohesive roadmap moving forward with their user interface standard. So, I can definitely understand that from a software development background that I have is that, sometimes you have so many different things out there where you're just like, no, I have to rewrite this entire thing for stuff moving forward. So I can understand that. But again, it is kind of a bummer that it's not going to be coming back to older devices. But again, like I think there are small little features here and there though that I would just love to see those come back. And honestly, the number one thing is the touch unlock feature. That's not like a complete user interface overhaul thing.
It is not. But as a reminder, on our big long email threads, that is literally the exact example of a feature you asked if it was coming back. And they said hard no, which is too bad because like you said, it's incredibly useful. It's so... I have no idea what that cost, if you will, to implement, right? I can see how that is a spider web that you're like, oh, you just swiped and all of a sudden before you know it, it's like, well, you got to do across this page and this page and this page, and how do you do it here and there, right? Like I can see how that yarn just spirals out of control from a software design standpoint.
Sure.
But it's really useful.
It's so useful. Like, I mean, on my we've joked about it before, like on my Epix Gen 2 or Epix Pro Gen 2. Oh my gosh. Epix Gen 2 Pro, whatever. Anyways, that watch,
Yeah.
I ended up turning off the touchscreen on many occasions just because I just got a lot of accidental swipes and stuff like that, like especially in the shower and whatnot. So
Yeah.
I'd come out of the shower with like some extra widgets, you know, on my widgets.
All the time. So many extra widgets or loss of widgets every time.
Yeah, so I mean, the touch unlock feature, I mean, it's kind of weird to say, but it's like it's probably one of my new favorite features of the Fenix 8
Yep.
and the Enduro 3 and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know. I hope they reconsider some of those smaller features, but we obviously have already gotten that no from them. So, but yeah, so I don't know. Is that everything to talk about in the Fenix 8? Like before we move on to the Enduro 3, I think.
I think that's it. Yeah. Oh, we should probably mention they killed off the small one, the small MIP one.
Yo, yeah, they did kill off the small one, which is upsetting to your wife because she was a big fan of the MIP. But now has she been using the new AMOLED for a little bit and like
It's going on her wrist here for our ride and whenever we finish this podcast.
Oh, so she hasn't tried it yet. No.
She doesn't know that yet, no, but that's the plan. So she knows that's impending, but
I'll be interested to hear.
She's tried AMOLEDs before, but we'll give it another whirl here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess it'll be interesting to hear her thoughts on that. But I guess we can just talk about that. It'll segue into the Enduro 3, I think, with a memory and pixel. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's kind of interesting that they did kill that one off. I think their reasoning for that was that the stack of the solar panel plus the memory and pixel display was going to be too large to put into that case where it would kind of like limit the display size or something along those lines. Yeah. But I don't know. It's like at the same time, we've talked about the AMOLED versus MIP discussion moving forward, and yeah, we'll talk about it with the Enduro 3. Yeah, I think
let's loop back to that because we got to play some bets. We got to play some bets after Enduro 3.
Oh, okay, interesting. Oh, and really quick, we wanted to also give a quick shout out to our newest podcast sponsor, the Pros Closet, who's also helping support this episode. So you probably already know about the Pros Closet as being one of the largest and most trusted sources for quality certified used bikes out there, with over like 600 or so bikes currently listed on their site, from mountain bikes to road bikes to gravel bikes. You name it, they probably have it. Now, the Pros Closet is definitely not just about buying some random used bike off of Craigslist or something like that. All these bikes go through a very thorough process of cleaning to drying to being checked over for anything that may need to be replaced, and then are finally tuned up by master mechanics before being professionally photographed and then boxed up, just like a new bike, and then you're ready to go. And going with the Pros Closet is probably one of the best ways to save money on buying a used bike versus a new bike, and still knowing that you're getting a bike that you can trust that's in amazing condition. And actually, if you have a bike that you're looking to find a new home for, you can also sell your bike to the Pros Closet, where you can get a store credit, you can trade up for something fancier, or you can, of course, get cash if your bike is accepted. But something that's actually back with the Pros Closet is their consignment program, where you could potentially get even more for your used bike versus their cash offering, where there's still a guaranteed minimum price that they'll offer you for your bike at the end of 120 days, but you could actually sell for more before that time comes up. And one last thing about the Pros Closet is that it's not just about bikes. They've actually got an entire retail showroom that's actually just a little bit down the road from me where I live in Boulder. So you can actually stop on in there to check out all the new gear that they have, from helmets to shoes to components to plenty of the stuff that we actually talk about in this podcast, like bike computers. Anyhow, we've got a special code for all you podcast listeners where you can get $40 off any purchase of $200 or more. So just go ahead and check out the link in the description below and use the special code 2024FitFile40 to get that next piece of gear that you need. Anyhow, thanks to the Pros Closet for sponsoring this episode.
Let's talk about Enduro 3 then.
All right. Yeah.
So Enduro 3 was announced at the exact same time. And if you're not familiar with the Enduro series, it is their ultra-focused series from a battery life standpoint. Enduro has always been about battery life. And to give you like the 30-second version for people not familiar, when the first Enduro came out, I think like 3 years ago, they essentially took a Fenix 6X Pro and 6X Pro, I think.
Solar, whatever.
Solar, the biggest Fenix 6X they had at the time with the most features, and they took all the features away that everyone actually cared about and left you with basically a watch that could do breadcrumb trail routing and a big old battery, right? And that was it. But it didn't have maps. They took away maps and music and all the things that you wanted, but especially maps were gone. As you might expect for a watch focused on trail usage and going a long time and a long, long ways, that didn't go over super well. So they came back a year and a half later with with the Enduro 2. And this time they changed the design, and they took the Fenix 7X solar, and they kept all the features, and they added a bigger battery and made it a little lighter as well. And effectively, it was like a Fenix X solar plus, right? Like it just was a bigger version of that watch from a battery standpoint.
You know what? I don't know if it was lighter or not. I think it was lighter just because the UltraFit band, but I think the case may have been,
So
been actually a little bit
package
heavier.
lighter.
Yeah, the whole package was a little lighter just because. Anyways,
Yeah,
yeah,
the whole package
go
was
ahead.
lighter. And
Sorry,
they
go
also
ahead.
improved the flashlight on it as well to be a little bit brighter than actually the Fenix 7 as well. And so that was like a great example of like, now this makes sense, and people loved it, and I went out and did a crazy long trek with it, and all was good. So now we fast forward to the Enduro 3, and they've effectively split the difference between those two paradigms. So instead of having all the Fenix 8 features, it does not have the dive, it doesn't have speaker and microphone, but it does have a thicker solar panel design around the outside edge, but removes the solar panel across the top of the unit. So you get a little bit more clarity on that than you would have had in the Enduro 2, because that solar panel, that's the transparent solar panel across the entire display, isn't quite as transparent as you might think. And they added, again, effectively more solar power by having this much thicker, totally redesigned solar system that no longer has a red ring, but it's actually a black ring. So it looks literally like the bezel. Like you don't even notice a solar panel is there anymore. And with that, they, in some cases, more than doubled the battery life claims anyways of the device. And so I think in a lot of ways, they really stuck the landing on what people wanted, except then they did one more thing. They dropped the price by $200, $300, give or take. So it's down to $899 from what was, I think, between $1,100 and $1,200, depending on which models you had. And that was a huge thing. So now you have something that undercuts the Fenix by $200, the Fenix 8 MIP-based solar units by $200, $300.
300.
Oh, okay, $300. Wow, hot diggity.
Because remember, there isn't a non-sapphire titanium Fenix 8 solar. Yeah, so it's $1,200, yeah, for the Fenix 8 solar. Actually, hold on, I'll just like verify it really quick, but yeah, it should be.
Yeah, you're right. Nope, $1,200. Yeah,
$1,200. Yeah. So
so
yeah, $300 difference for the dive features in the speaker and microphone. That's a lot of money. That's a ton of money.
As I put in my Enduro 3 review, this is the arguably better, cheaper Fenix 8 solar if you don't care about diving and microphone speaker stuff, right? Like that's the simple reality is you get way more battery life than a Fenix 8 solar at the exact same large size, if you will. This is only offered in 51 millimeter, so it's the bigger size watches, but it feels really light because, again, that UltraFit band. In the back case, they went with I'm not sure what they call it, plastic basically is the best term for that, non-metallic case, if you will.
I called it resin in my review, which will be coming out like tomorrow.
Exactly. I think it's technically called TPU or something like that, right? But
whatever.
Point is, it's whatever.
Plastic,
It's got all the same accuracy. It's got, again, more battery life, the same ECG capable sensor, at least right now in the United States anyways. Down the road that will probably change, but where it's certified, wrist temperature tracking, all the benefits of the Fenix 8, again, except for diving and speaker and microphone. So it's got the new user interface on it. It's got all the new features we just talked about from a software standpoint. And so very, very appealing watch, and also has the 32 gigs for maps and music as well. So this is a fascinating little watch, and it's one of those things where it wasn't until I was literally filming the end of my Enduro 3 review, and it clicked in my brain. I'm like, wait a second. This is the watch you get if you wanted a Fenix 8 solar and didn't care about all those features. Like a lot of people have complained about they don't need diving, they don't need micro and speakerphone. They just didn't care about those, yet Garmin jacked up the prices on the Fenix 8 to accommodate that. This solves that problem. And I don't think at any point in any of our discussions did Garmin hint at that of hey, this is maybe a better option. Obviously, they probably wouldn't want to because it, reduces their revenue by $300. But this is the one to go for.
Yeah, but that really gets to the pricing strategy. It's I think that that was certainly a point that both of us made in our Fenix 8 reviews is the price increase on these for those new features. And again, it's redesigning the case. I would have to imagine that, takes some significant manufacturing costs to do. But considering that the Fenix 7 and Epix Pro, or Fenix 7 Pro and Epix Pro, are incredibly capable watches already, and it is just those two extra features, that extra money, it's definitely tough. And it's even more tough for the MIP Solar Fenix 8s, just because, again, of that starting price of those. So it's fascinating how, in my mind, the solar ones are a bit overpriced, and the Enduro 3 is, I don't want to say underpriced, but it's a really, really good deal for what you're getting. Like, really, really good deal.
Just for context, the cheapest entry point for a Fenix 7 Pro was $799 for the base MIP-based models there. And then now the cheapest entry point for a Fenix 8 solar model, which is the MIP-based models, because there's no non-solar MIP-based models, is $1,100. Right, so $1099. So that's the 47 millimeter solar is $1099, and the 51 millimeter solar is $1199. So we're talking a big jump there. The cheapest AMOLED model is $999. So only $100 more than it was in the past for the cheapest Epix Pro. But now some of those things are kind of built in from like a multi-band and stuff like that. That wasn't there in the Epix, but was, I guess, there in the Epix Pro.
Sure.
Back to battery life though. So the Enduro 3 battery life, its big claim here is in GPS only mode 320 hours with solar accounted for, depending on how much solar you have, or without solar gains. So if you're just like our day of our hike there, we got dumped on, then 120 hours in GPS only mode. And one of the things that was fascinating to me is that, historically speaking, you and I would have looked at like GPS only mode as like the wrong part of town to be in, right? We've been like, no, we don't do GPS only. We do Sat IQ, right? Like that's we're not going to do this GPS only stuff. So we had fun on our adventure, and we sacrificed me to be the one in GPS only mode, and you got to hang out in the luxury estates of Sat IQ, which allows the basically GPS chipset to go up and down between multi-band when it needs it in like tough conditions, and then all the way down to lesser GPS modes when it doesn't need it to save battery life. Like, it's, as I said in my review, I would argue one of Garmin's best engineering accomplishments of the last few years. And even one of their competitors, I won't name who, told me the same thing. They were very, very jealous of what Garmin's done in Sat IQ mode. And so we were curious, like, how different would these tracks be at the end of the day with in the mountains, me and you, including half a day in literal hail and thunderstorms between these two? And the answer was nearly identical, right? So our tracks that day, between the two of them, were only 200 meters off after 28K roughly. So we're talking 28,000 meters of going somewhere, and 200 meters off in dense forests, up against cliffs, like all the things. And the difference is the tracks were negligible in the vast majority of the cases. Not negligible. They were not vast majority. They were negligible across the board, right? You wouldn't be able to tell the difference in most cases. Really, really fascinating stuff. Like, I think I've never really done a GPS only test on this new chipset in the last few years. And this was like, I'm going to start doing some more of these because this is actually much better than I thought it would be.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we've said it before too. It's like, it's definitely not about the dual band, or it's not even about like multi-satellites. It's so much of it comes around the antenna design and where you're going to get really good accuracy. So I think that, I don't know, we may save this for like a future episode at some point, but it's like, multi-band or dual band, that could be like one of our hot takes, is that you don't necessarily need it. Like I would say 90% of the time, like if you're, in a, downtown environment like New York City or something like that, you probably need it. But like for 90% of most activities, you don't really need dual band or multi-band. So anyways, in regards to battery life, now one of the big factors when it comes to battery life with the Enduro 3, other than the new solar technology as well as the larger battery, is the fact that it uses a memory and pixel display. You just can't get that kind of battery life out of an AMOLED display. So, memory and pixel displays, we've had this kind of debate, going back and forth, especially in the last couple of years, where since AMOLED display battery life technology has gotten a lot better, or efficiency has gotten a lot better. And, both of us used the Fenix 8 AMOLED and the Enduro 3 kind of side to side on basically everything that we did during our trip. And memory and pixel displays, they certainly do have that distinct advantage in direct sunlight, where they are amazing. However, there were so many occasions when we were like in the woods, in shady environments, in the rain, in the hailstorm, where, I mean, quite frankly, I couldn't see the display at all. Like it was
Yeah.
so challenging to see. So, I don't know. It's really tough. Like I was a memory and pixel display holdout as well. Like, like when the Epix Gen 2 first came out, I liked it and all, but I ended up using the Fenix 7 solar more. And actually the 7X solar more specifically, just because quite frankly, it had a flashlight and the Epix Gen 2 didn't have a flashlight. That was actually probably one of
Right.
the primary reasons, but
Yeah.
I was a holdout for a long time as well. But yeah, after using those side by side, again, I think that there are going to be reasons to get this watch in terms of like you're that ultra endurance athlete that you need to go track like a week, 2 week long activity or something like that. I mean that this is going to be the watch to get. But for like everything else, unless you are like die hard on only wanting to like charge your watch like once a month or something like that. I don't know. There are just so many more advantages to AMOLED in my mind. Yeah. I mean, I know that there's the like, oh, I don't want to have a smart phone on my wrist sort of thing versus the memory pixel display. I think that can be another argument there too. But I don't know, just usability wise, I have zero issues with an AMOLED display. I've said it once,
Well, one
and
thing that people, I saw some comments on today or last few days, people are like, oh, I don't like the fact that it lights up every time, like an AMOLED lights up every time you raise your wrist. You can turn that off. It's a literal setting in the display settings on an AMOLED, on a Garmin AMOLED watch to turn off gesture base for the backlight to turn on again, right? So that way, it's still, you can still have always on in a dim state, very similar, almost identical to MIP. And then when you raise your wrist, nothing happens unless you either tap the screen or tap a button. That's an option you can have. Going back to your like sunlight visibility thing, yes, in direct sun, like top of the mountain sort of thing, you can definitely that mid-base display like explodes in visibility, right?
totally.
But at the same time, the AMOLED display is totally viewable to the eyes, right? Taking a photo of that side by side on a camera is tremendously difficult to replicate what your eyes see because of the fact that almost every camera out there, unless you really zoom in, will basically go ahead and normalize the entire scene. And so the black background of that watch becomes basically not as well exposed as the rest of the scene. But if you were to zoom in on just that watch, and the camera properly exposes it just like your eyes do, and you're like, oh, I can see this perfectly fine. And that's where, like you said, in the woods and stuff, it was totally not usable.
No.
Without turning on the backlight either manually or gesture based, but then that opens up a different can of worms. And so, yeah, it's too bad there. But that's the trade-offs
Yeah, that's
you make.
exactly.
And also the battery on the AMOLED is so good these days, right? Like we're not talking like only getting 10 hours or something silly, right? We're talking still big numbers for GPS activities on AMOLED. So let's kind of attempt to wrap things up in some way, shape, or form. I guess one of the questions then is, where do we see down the road Enduro versus Fenix going? So a two-parter here. Will the Fenix series have a MIP-based future in a Fenix 9? Or
Oh,
will that just become Enduro?
that's a really really good question actually. I guess it's really going to be based on the popularity of the Fenix 7 Solar moving forward. Again, I
Fenix
think
8
there's
Solar,
yeah, I think there's plenty. I think there's plenty of, or Phoenix 8 Solar. Yes, pardon me. Yeah, I mean, again, like I think that there are still certainly reasons to get a memory and pixel display. But as we saw with the pricing on the Phoenix 8 Solar, there's obviously some reason why it was $1,200 and not $100 less like it was with the previous generation. So there are certainly some costs associated with that there. But at the same time, you look at the other side of the coin with the Enduro 3, and it's like, well, this has a memory and pixel display as well as solar technology as well, but it's $300 cheaper. So, so where's that money coming from exactly? But yeah,
Yep.
I don't know. I guess it's really going to, again, depend on the popularity of the memory and pixel displays. I think we have personal opinions on our display preference, of course. Again, like I've shifted over personally because it suits my needs. AMOLED displays, they They do have some drawbacks, like, they do dim after a certain amount of time. Like if you want to have it mounted on your handlebars, that's going to be a little bit challenging as well for like
Which,
cycling.
by the way, works. I did that actually.
Oh, did? Oh,
The
okay.
other
I
night.
haven't tried
Yeah.
that yet. Okay.
So I was curious. Some people asked, like, does that turn off the display? It does not. On the Garmin Fenix 8 AMOLED, I put it on my handlebars for just shy of an hour, and the display never once turned off. It did dim slightly, but
Yeah.
because my ride was about an hour before sunset, it wasn't like crazy bright, and so I had no problems viewing it whatsoever. Like it was totally viewable the entire time.
Sure.
But it never once turned off, which is a change from I believe even the Epix Pro I think turned off. But Garmin around the Venue 3 time frame changed some of that logic there, and so the Venue 3, for example, did actually stay on the entire time on your handlebars without turning off. So just as a minor little FYI for those that are curious about that.
Yeah. That's a very, very good topic that you brought up, but I'm going to say that no, I say by whatever, the Fenix 9, whether that's the next generation or 2 generations from now, whatever the case may be. I'm going to say that, yeah, I think it's going to split off into Enduro and Fenix, where Enduro is going to be memory and pixel and Fenix is going to be AMOLED. Yep.
Yeah, I agree. I think it makes sense. I suspect what Garmin's seeing right now is they're going to see a bump in sales, like a basically launch day bump of the MIP-based displays from the diehard MIP folks, right? And then once you get past like 6 months from now, 5 months, 4 months, whatever, then I suspect they're going to see almost the vast majority of their sales being AMOLED, right? As people, I mean, certainly people eventually will upgrade from previous models to the Fenix 8, but I mean, I think they're probably already seeing that. That's why, like, in all the marketing stuff they talked about with us, it wasn't called Fenix 8 AMOLED. It was just called Fenix 8. And then the MIP-based version was called Fenix 8 Solar.
Sure.
The only place we see that differentiated is on the retailer side. Their official product names are Fenix 8 AMOLED and Fenix 8 Solar. That's how like the official retail copy that Garmin has sent out. But that by itself, the way Garmin phrased that in all their marketing stuff, to me tells you what that future is. Now, we could be wrong, but I suspect, like you said, it's going to splinter off and Enduro becomes a MIP-based thing for the future, which then gets to the second question. Will Enduro then gain alternate sizes?
Wow, that's another interesting topic to bring up. I would say yes. They're obviously, they weren't afraid of dropping the Epix name, and, merging that into the Fenix. So I don't see them being afraid of dropping MIP entirely from the Fenix lineup either and just shifting that to the Enduro series. So yeah. We did forget to talk about one watch though, the Fenix E. So this was their
right. Garmin forgot
new,
to talk about it too.
Dang. Burn.
Not untrue though.
Yeah, exactly.
Not untrue at all.
Yeah. So the Fenix E is the new it's the new budget Fenix basically. So but it is essentially equivalent to their Epix Gen 2, the original Epix Gen 2. So it has, the same 1.3 inch AMOLED display. It has the 4th generation heart rate sensor. It does not have a flashlight. However, it does come with the new software, the new user interface moving forward. So that's basically the difference there. So it's priced at $799, I believe. $799. But I think the issue I see with that watch is, I mean, I think it's great that they're coming out with a budget offering. I actually really, really do, because I think that there's a lot of people out there who, can't use all the features of a Fenix. Like you were saying, you notice some people, it's like, well, you've never done a, ultra trail run or anything, and you're
5K.
wearing a Fenix, but yeah. Oh man, sorry. I'll refrain from another joke there. But yeah, I mean, it offers a really durable build. It offers a ton of sports features, but again, it's like you may be able to save a lot of money by going with the Fenix E. However, like in terms of the price that you can get a brand new Epix Gen 2 for right now, you can actually save I think at least $100, if not $200. I think you can get those for like $500 to $600 now, brand new, depending on the
400s at one point over the last few months, right? And
Sure,
we're going to the fall, and if we know anything about Garmin, there is one truism, right? Garmin cannot resist putting their previous gen products on deep discount in doing that for years, right? Like years. And so that's like the Garmin way more than anything else that people talk about Garmin. Garmin knows how to offload not just old inventory, but they keep making old inventory to offload, right? And so this is one where I just look at it and go, why would I, unless Garmin's going to heavily discount the Fenix E, we will get to Black Friday in just over 2 months, that entire time frame. And I guarantee you, we're going to see Amazon selling Epix Gen 2s for 400s, maybe even like a $399 in there, right?
Yeah.
And then that even sets aside the entire like Epix Pro, right? Which I wouldn't be surprised to see like a $499 Epix Pro. I don't.
Ooh, that's that's a stretch. I think that'll be in our pool of bets.
I think
like
we'll see a $499. I think we'll
Epix
see
Pro.
Uncle Amazon go wild, right? Because that's what, right? So you think about retailer behind the scenes here, right? So retailers can get in trouble from Garmin and GoPro and other companies that have map pricing in the US by going below minimum suggested pricing, right? They can get an approval to do that for a sale period. So like when Garmin has something on sale, then RAI, everyone else puts it on sale for the price that Garmin allows. A retailer can legally, though, sell it for whatever the heck they want. However, contractually speaking, Garmin in the US, this is illegal in Europe, but Garmin in the US can say, yeah, but we're not going to give you stock for X amount of time. So what Amazon does is they say, no problem, Garmin, we're going to buy 10,000 units now. And they buy their 10,000 units, and then X period of time later, they put them on sale below map, and then Garmin slaps them on the wrist and say, okay, now you have a 3 or 6 month no buy period for that particular model. Amazon doesn't care. They bought 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 units. They just keep on selling them as they see fit for whatever price they want.
Sure.
So I suspect we'll see a $499 Epix Pro at some point from Uncle Amazon, right? Uncle Amazon gets drunk at some point in the holidays. He always does, and he does crazy things with pricing, and that's my bet.
I'm gonna say 600. Price is Right rules. We'll follow up on that bet after Black Friday, and we'll bet on some tacos or something like that.
There we go.
Yeah, one of those things. So yeah. So, anyways, yeah. So that's the all of Garmin's new releases. Definitely check out all our videos surrounding these watches. I'm actually going to be publishing my Enduro 3 review tomorrow morning, along with another just kind of like some tips and stuff like that for some of these watches as well. So make sure to look out for those videos. Ray just published his user interface tour as well. So go ahead and check out that to learn about your new watch. And coming up, yeah, we've got a whole bunch of exciting stuff. So next week there's some exciting stuff. And then the week after is the Apple event. Yeah. So that's going to be super fun. So we'll definitely do an in-person recording, wherever that's going to be. Like we could be
wherever is the best explanation of that ever. We will save the wherever for whenever. That's
exactly. So yeah. Anyways, reminder, you can check out the FitFile podcast on YouTube. I think that's probably the best way to experience the podcast because it's not just because of our pretty faces, but we'll be overlaying some like B-roll and stuff like that on there. But you can also switch over the podcast to the YouTube Music app as well, and then also check us out on Spotify as well as. Is that it?
Yeah, you did it. You did it all.
I think that's it, right? Okay, that's all.
Apple Podcast too, I guess.
And Apple Podcast. Yeah. Oh my gosh, duh. Yeah, exactly. So and so any last words for you for this episode, Ray?
No, that's it, man. You got it all. We're done.
All right. Sounds good. See you guys in the next episode.
Thanks all.